Thank you all for joining for my thesis defense. As introduced, my name is Mihir Kulkarni, and I'm a graduate student with the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at the University of Nevada, Reno. I work at the Autonomous Robots Lab under the guidance of Dr. Kostas Alexis. I would like to thank him for his guidance and constant support during this work. And I also thank all the members of the committee, Dr. Christos Papachristos, Dr. Marco Hutter, and Dr. Hauk Su for their valuable time and guidance. Motivated by the DARPA Subterranean Challenge, and with the activities of our lab extending into the subterranean domains, we observed certain challenges posed by these environments. They feature large-scale, multi-branching topologies with varying complicated physical characteristics. These may prove too large for single robots to map and explore quickly. Use of multiple robots may help rapidly explore such complicated environments. Furthermore, establishing a constant communication network connection is difficult. Hence, a framework resilient to communication loss must be developed for seamless exploration of environments outside the communication range. As our team was participating in the DARPA Subterranean Challenge, the need for an intelligent coordination framework was observed, which helps reduce the workload from the human operator and performs decision-making in an abstracted manner, leaving a human operator to focus on more critical tasks. To perform such large-scale robotic deployments, we need to accurately model robot characteristics in simulation and create environments that capture the complexity of the real world. It is difficult and expensive to constantly test the developments to algorithms on the real robots. Hence, having simulated models with accurate sensor characteristics allows to thoroughly test the software for improving the performance and addressing critical issues. This work is presented in 3 parts. The first part focuses on developing the capability of performing accurate simulations. The process to create robot models and simulation worlds is described to rapidly test and evaluate algorithms before deploying them on real-world systems. Using these capabilities in the second part, a framework for multi-robot coordination for exploration of complex underground environments is proposed. A complete framework for centralized multi-robot planning strategy to efficiently explore the environment in presence of communication constraints is developed, and evaluations are performed in simulation using multiple robots. The robot models developed in part 1 are used to evaluate the performance of the framework. The final part of this presentation details the contributions to the DARPA Subterranean Challenge as a part of Team Cerberus. Field testing of robots in real environments is necessary. However, during the deployment phase, it may turn out to be time and resource consuming. It requires significant setup time, and minor issues in hardware may take hours to resolve. With all of this, the testing of algorithms during development is delayed. A faster alternative to performing real-world tests is by running computer simulations. They are fast, repeatable, and with the advent of better simulators, they are becoming increasingly reliable. It is possible to easily test out the algorithms in simulations to debug and evaluate them quickly without fear of any damage or damage to the robots or to its hardware. While real-world tests are necessary before large-scale deployments, as they point out issues in the systems, simulations help with rapid development and testing to ensure that the software on the robots is bug-free. We develop robot models to accurately simulate the sensors and dynamics for testing our planning algorithms. Ignition and Gazebo simulators are used with ROS-based interfaces, allowing to interact with the simulated entities. These simulators use an XML-based robot description language. These are the URDF, which is the Unified Robot Description Format, and the newer Simulation Description Format, or the SDF. These formats allow description of components, actuators, sensors, and links on the real robot. In the next few slides, I will describe the process to create simulation models for the Ignition and Gazebo simulators. A robot in the Ignition simulator is defined using a central structural component with sensors, actuators, and other entities connected to it. The code required for the functioning of simulated components is dynamically loaded as plugins as the robot is spawned in the simulator. The visual component of the robot model is a textured mesh exported from a CAD modeling software. A similar mesh is defined for collision, and this is checked with the environment for detecting the collisions of the robot with the environment. The rotors of the robot are defined with respect to the base link, and a revolute joint allows the motion. Each rotor is connected to a simulated actuator, which in turn is controlled by a multi-copter plugin responsible for providing a high-level control interface to the user. The dynamic characteristics of each of these models are also closely matched with the real robots using data with the aid of motion capture systems. Various components and sensors on board the robot are added, and their parameters are based on the configuration of the sensors on the real system. This process was used to model the robot submitted for the open source repositories for the DARPA Subterranean Challenge. Simulation models for 4 flying robots were developed: the DJI M100 Aerial Scout, Gagarin, Resilient Microflyer Oblix, and a lightweight version of the Resilient Microflyer. The robots 1, 3, and 4, that are the M100 Aerial Scout, Gagarin, and RMF Oblix, each contain an RGB camera, a 3D LiDAR sensor, while the prior model, which is the lightweight Resilient Microflyer, contains only a stereo camera and 4 range sensors pointing radially outward from its center. A vertical time of flight sensor is also simulated atop the Gagarin simulation model for it to be able to see the surfaces of the ceiling. As you can see, all models except the M100 Aerial Scout are collision tolerant and provide protection to the sensors and propellers using a cage-like structure. This allows the robot to endure collisions during the mission and continue exploration without damage to any of its components. These models are all open sourced and are available for use in the GitHub and in the Subti Tech repo. We also developed a model of the wheeled or roving robot for testing our software on ground systems in Gazebo. The model is inspired by the InspectorBot's Super Megabot platform. The physical robot was highly customized for participating in the DARPA Subterranean Challenge. A metal frame was built on top of the cuboid chassis, which hosted the onboard computer, a large set of sensors. This mesh was exported from a CAD software. For simulation purposes, only selected sensors on board the robot were added. The simulation model includes 2 3D LiDAR sensors, one mounted horizontally and one with an oblique orientation for it to be able to see the ground in front of the robot. 3 RGB cameras capture the images on the front and the sides of the robot. A skid steer controller plugin with a velocity interface is provided. The simulation model is also publicly available on GitHub. It is particularly difficult to model and capture the complexity of the real-world environments. Developments to the Ignition Simulator attempt to enable the quick creation of simulation environments using building blocks resembling tunnel, urban, and cave-like topologies. However, the complexity of the world and the variations that are observed are limited by the number and variations of the building blocks created. Reconstruction of real environments is significantly accurate, and it is an alternative to building synthetic worlds. Previously collected point cloud data can be utilized to reconstruct a mesh of the environment to be used in simulation. In this slide, a reconstructed mesh from the Great Saltpeter Preserve in Kentucky is created using data collected during an autonomous exploration mission of the Animal Sea robot. On the right, a simulation world consisting of individual building blocks is shown in the Ignition Simulator. We show the process to construct a mesh from the collected data. Handheld data collection was performed in the Subway Cave in California. This is a natural lava tube with smooth features. A Velodyne Puck 16-beam LiDAR was used to collect the point cloud data of the cave, while a mapping framework was used to incrementally aggregate the submaps and align them with each other to form a consistent global map. We use this global map and export the surfaces of the environment as a mesh that can be opened with a CAD modeling software. A step-by-step procedure to create simulation environments is shown in this image. Signed distance field volumetric maps are incrementally built using a fixed time window by a mapping framework. The fused mesh is then exported as a Stanford polygon format file and opened in MeshLab software. This mesh contains noisy information, excess triangles, and incomplete surfaces with cavities. Triangles projecting outside the surface are removed manually, and Poisson surface reconstruction is performed to close cavities. This results in a smooth mesh with watertight surfaces that preserves existing features. Once the mesh is processed, a simulation world is created to include the model of the mesh. Our robots and worlds created using this process are then used to test out our algorithms. In the next part of the presentation, I will describe Cohort, a multi-robot cooperation framework for heterogeneous teams of robots. This framework is centralized and runs on a central computation hub, providing the required resources for processing. Cohort assumes a common aligned global frame of reference for all the robots and is resilient to communication loss. The robots can explore regions outside the communication range, returning periodically to transfer the data. Each robot in the system is equipped with onboard autonomy based on the GBPlanner 2 framework. This provides the required onboard capabilities to each robot to independently explore the environment. Cohort identifies global frontiers for the entire team of robots and repositions each individual robot to maximize the exploration performed by the entire team and efficiently explores complex multi-branching topologies. A centralized multi-robot mapping framework is used for aggregating and aligning the individual maps generated by each robot in the common global frame. Maps are built using a signed distance field representation recorded over a fixed window. This representation is characterized by discretizing the environment into cubical voxels of fixed size, each containing information about its distance from a detected point on a surface using an onboard sensor. Raycasting is performed to calculate the values of the signed distance field, where each voxel contains distance to the nearest surfaces observed by the sensor. Having a single large map leads to inconsistencies as the robot odometry is prone to drift. To avoid this, maps are collected in small windows and stored in memory. The window is determined to be of a maximum time or of maximum robot displacement. And the recording of the map stops after the completion of the assigned window and collection of the next map begins. Each of these individual maps are called submaps. Each robot has an onboard ROS node that creates submaps using the combined data from the sensor. These are stored onboard until they can be sent back to the central computation hub. These are created at a predefined common resolution as the multi-robot mapping framework requires all submaps to have similar voxel sizes. Voxgraph is used as the centralized multi-robot mapping framework to aggregate and align the individual maps generated by each robot. The image on this slide shows how incremental maps are built and added to the global map estimate one after another as they're received by the central computation hub. The first submap is received from the robot and registered, following which a second submap is aligned with the previous estimate and fused to form a global map estimate. This global map estimate is essentially a collection of aligned submaps and is used to perform collision checking for building a graph to plan the motion of the robot. In this image, three submaps are fused together, and this image shows a global map estimate consisting of three consecutive submaps from a single robot. However, this process works similarly for all maps received from different robots in the exploration mission. The multi-robot mapping framework extends this concept and aligns maps from different robots in the same global coordinate frame. Submaps are sent back only when a communication link is available. As each new submap is received by the central computation hub, an Euclidean signed distance field representation is generated, and 0th level isosurface points present in the submap and its neighbors are aligned. These isosurface points have the same ESDF value within a given map. Constraints are generated for the neighboring submaps, and post-graph optimization is performed in the local region. Once aligned, the maps are stored in a submap collection. With this contains the information in each map and the updated transforms of every submap. This is later used to compute local and global frontiers for the entire team of robots. While Voxcraft does not generate loop closure constraints, it can incorporate them into the optimization if provided by an external source. Hence, this approach is extendable and can be interfaced with additional mapping frameworks that can identify and generate such constraints. Once each submap is received and registered by the mapping framework, the local frontiers for the submap are found using a breadth-first traversal starting from the origin of the submap in its local frame. In this image, separate sections of the environment are shown with the robot trajectories in blue and red color. We define a frontier voxel as an unknown voxel in a map that neighbors a free voxel. Breadth-first traversal is performed over the submap starting from the origin, and contiguous sets of frontier voxels are found. The origin of the submap frame is set to be the relative position of the robot at the beginning of recording of that particular submap. These contiguous sets of frontier voxels are called a frontier. During this process, the extremities of the voxels visited are determined to be the bounding boxes of the submap. These bounding boxes are used later for providing limits while sampling for a graph to plan the motion of the robot. Each of the frontier voxels are approximated by the centroid of the voxel, also called a frontier point. The entire process of calculating local frontiers is performed only once per submap. The frontier voxels for a given submap may lie within known regions of other neighboring submaps. They represent already explored areas and are not global frontiers for the system. To discard them, each frontier point in every submap is checked in the global map. It is removed if it lies within the known voxel of another submap. Once all the local frontiers are removed with this process, the frontiers that remain are called the global frontiers. Since the detection of local frontiers happens only once per submap, a deleted frontier voxel is not considered further throughout the mission. The image shows an example of two neighboring submaps created by two robots exploring adjacent regions of the environment. The left frontier in the top submap and the right frontier in the bottom submap lie within the known regions of each other. These are deleted as they do not represent the true global frontiers for the multi-robot exploration problem. This process is performed each time a new submap is added in the region. Deletion of frontier points may cause the frontiers to no longer remain as connected components, as the points in the middle of the frontiers are removed. Disconnected components are separated into individual frontiers. We also remove frontiers that have sizes less than a set threshold. In the previous slide, we saw an example of two submaps removing local frontiers from each other. However, there may occur conditions where two overlapping submaps share common frontiers. When transformed into the global frame, these frontiers overlap, leading to double counting. All these frontier points are aggregated and converted into a single global frontier by discretizing them into voxels in the global frame. That prevents an overestimation of the size of the frontier. This image shows submaps being added to the global map. The previous global frontiers are deleted and new frontiers are recalculated as the robots explore the region further. For each new submap, a fixed number of vertices are sampled within the bounding box. Collision-free edges are constructed between the vertices to create a graph. This is called a subgraph as it is associated with a submap. The robot's trajectory is added to the subgraph, and this is done to ensure that the robot will certainly be able to find a way back using its own trajectory information in case the environment in the region is too cluttered to build a complete connected graph. The image shows subgraphs created independently within two submaps by different robots. Since every subgraph is sampled in the local frame of the submap, it can easily be transformed into the common global frame. All individual subgraphs are integrated into a larger graph constructed in the global frame. This is called the global graph and passes throughout the explored region of the volume. This graph is created by directly adding the transformed subgraph vertices and associated edges into a consolidated graph. As the transformations of the associated submap are updated by the multi-robot mapping framework, the global position of each vertex in the subgraph is updated. Vertices in the proximity of the global frontiers are treated as potential points for the robots to start their exploration. To approximate the distance to a frontier, distances of these selected points from the robot is calculated. This information is then used to reposition the robot to these candidate points to begin their independent exploration steps. The coordination strategy is utilized each time the robot requests a pass to a global frontier. The largest global frontiers are derived, and the shortest paths to each of them are calculated from the robot's position using the Dijkstra's algorithm. The robot is repositioned to the nearest frontier to begin its independent exploration steps. This frontier may have been found by another robot, and the region around this could be unknown to the onboard planner. To avoid the robot from going to previously explored regions and bias it towards the direction it has been repositioned to, volumes of submaps neighboring the frontiers are added as no-go zones. Having these compels the robot to complete local exploration around the designated frontier. And once this has been done, GB Planner onboard the robot is free to clear the no-go zones designated by cohort and continue exploration until it can return to communication. For enabling compatibility of GB Planner 2 with cohort, several modifications were made to the planner that allowed interaction with the central computation hub. Once the robot completes its independent exploration step and it is outside the communication range, it is allowed to continue its exploration for additional time. At the end of this time, it is required to return back to a point of communication. At each interaction with cohort, the location of the robot is stored in memory as a potential location for future communication with the central computation hub. To return to communication range, the robot recursively returns to the nearest previous points of interaction until it can establish a communication link with cohort. While the robot is outside the communication range, the submaps are stored on board the robot. Once the robot returns within communication range, the submaps stored on board are sent back to cohort in the order of collection and are added to the global map. The planner on board the robot requests for a path to a global frontier. The robot follows this path and the process is repeated iteratively until the environment is completely explored or the robot reaches the limit of its endurance. Cohort is also queried for a homing path if it is in communication. Otherwise, the homing path calculated onboard GB Planner is used to bring the robot safely back to the starting position. In this image, the robot is returning to communication after the completion of exploration outside the communication range that is denoted by cyan circles in this image. The surface of the mapped region as perceived by the robot's onboard mapping framework is shown as white points. We can see here that once the robot enters the communication range, the submaps are sent back and the frontiers and the global graph are calculated by cohort and are shown in the bottom image. This slide brings together all the independent concepts discussed so far in this part of the presentation. The robot can interact with the cohort in two manners. It can either send a new submap or request for a path. When a new submap is sent to cohort, the multi-robot mapping framework aligns the submap and stores it as a fused global map estimate. The same submap is used to calculate the local frontiers and the bounding box. The local frontiers are then deleted based on the occupancy information present in the global map estimate. The remaining local frontiers are brought to the global frame and the global frontiers are calculated and stored for the coordination strategy to use. The local bounding box is used to sample the subgraph, and this subgraph is integrated into a large global graph. Information of the vertices near the global frontiers are also stored in the global graph. When the robot requests for a new path, the coordination strategy selects the top largest frontiers and finds the shortest path to these frontiers. This path is then sent to the robot to follow and begin its independent exploration from that point. This video shows a 52-minute simulation study using simulated aerial robots in an environment inspired by the NIOSH mine in Pittsburgh. This is scaled roughly 2 times the original size. We used 3 robots, namely 1 RMF Obelix and 2 M100 aerial scouts discussed earlier in the presentation. The endurances of these robots are extended to 2000 seconds and 2500 seconds respectively. The communication is enabled within the Euclidean distance of 2 points where simulated network modules are placed, and these are shown with cyan circles. We can see the submaps update every time a robot is within the communication range, and all the robots return home at the end of their flight endurance. In the next mission, a comparison is made between 3 aerial robots having only onboard GB planner exploring independently versus a similar setup having cohort and onboard GB planners without any communication constraints throughout the mission. This mission is conducted for a duration of 2000 seconds. As expected, we see here that robots without a central coordination strategy tend to follow each other and visit previously explored areas, while cohort guides the robots to new frontiers and rapidly explores the full map. In the left environment, a central region remains unexplored as the robots tend to visit other regions, offering a higher possibility of exploration of volume as perceived by their onboard planners, while cohort correctly identifies the frontiers of interest and directs robots to explore in the designated area. In the final section, I will detail my contributions to Team Cerberus for the DARPA Subterranean Challenge. The DARPA Subterranean Challenge was a 4-year-long challenge organized by the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. The challenge laid an emphasis on the use of autonomous robots to rapidly navigate, map, search, and identify objects of interest in underground environment with varied topologies. The competition was scheduled to happen in 4 stages, with each stage featuring different topologies. The stages featured tunnel-like, urban, and cave-like topologies, with the final stage including all the topologies with having a possibility of transitions between them. Teams scored points by identifying and locating objects of interest known as artifacts. The teams were to report the estimated position of every artifact they detect within an accuracy of 5 meters in a fixed amount of time. A maximum number of reports were allowed per team for a given run. I worked on the artifact detection for our team, and I will discuss the procedure followed for detecting and estimating the location of these objects. In this slide, the fly-through videos show the complexity of the 3 sections of the final environment with the locations of each artifact. Entry into each kind of a section starts from a common branching point near the entrance of the environment. We can see the different kind of topologies, varying complexities and challenges posed by each kind of environment. These are all interconnected with narrow corridors, and artifacts are present throughout the competition environment. This slide shows the ground truth map of the final event environment released by DARPA with the positions of each artifact. From the previous video in this slide, we can see that the artifacts are scattered throughout the competition course, and robots were required to visit each part to be able to identify the artifacts present there. The lowermost part in this image shows the cave-like topologies with two large rooms present. The middle section showed tunnel-like topologies, and the top section shows urban topologies, where a mock subway station and railway tracks were also created in the simulation environment, in the competition environment. 10 classes of artifacts were announced for the final circuit. They were namely survivor, backpack, vent, drill, rope, fire extinguisher, phone, helmet, a sub-T cube, and carbon dioxide gas. The phone, sub-T cube, and carbon dioxide gas were detected by Bluetooth and gas sensors respectively, and the object detector was not trained to detect them. We trained a YOLO V3 object detector for identification of these artifacts. Extensive data collection was performed to collect a variety of images against different backgrounds, varying light conditions, and by using different cameras. Each of the collected images were sorted and removed in case of motion blur, lens flare, or repetition. These images were labeled by members of our team. The table shows the final count of the artifact labels generated and used for the competition, with an aggregate of over 40,000 labels. The process of object detection was particularly challenging, as small artifacts like rope or drill provided little distinguishing features to be detected by the neural network, while the red color of the backpack was being predominantly considered as a feature and red objects were being detected as backpacks. These behaviors were identified and datasets were specifically created to avoid these by training the network with images that was likely to misidentify. A YOLO V3 detection algorithm was chosen for this purpose. It was tested using a combination of different network configurations to compare the performance. For our case, training with a batch size of 16 and a mini batch size of 4 images was found to perform well and was chosen for the final circuit. The detector was configured to downsample images to 416 by 416 pixels for training, and images with different aspect ratio were downsampled until their maximum dimensions was 416. Black pixels were filled in to match the input dimensions for the neural network. The entirety of collected data was divided into 90% training data and 10% validation data. These included labeled images collected from different cameras from robots used by our team. We also experimented on selecting datasets to best train the network. In the graph shown in the image, we show the performance of various datasets used to train and evaluate the detector. Dataset A consisted of images that were collected much prior to the competition. However, the network trained using this dataset was prone to incorrect detections. For example, it detected all large red items as backpacks and all blue items as rope. To avoid this, specific images were collected containing items of the same color that were not artifacts. The network trained, these images were added to dataset A and constituted dataset B. The network trained with this showed improved detection performance. After this, dataset C added more images. However, it was prone to overfitting due to repetition of the kind of images that were already present in the prior data. And this dataset performed poorly on validation data. For the competition, the network trained for 10,000 iterations with dataset B was used. A filter was designed to estimate the location of the artifact in the environment once it was detected by the object detector. This work was primarily done by another member of my lab, Dr. Frank Mascarich, and I'm detailing the work here for completeness and for understanding the approach of our team. The bounding boxes of the artifact are detected by YOLO and converted into a grid of pixels. Rays are cast into the map for each pixel using the camera parameters. The median point of intersection of the rays is selected, and a sphere of fixed radius is constructed around it to estimate the location of the artifact. As the robot moves, the object is seen. As the robot moves, the object is seen from multiple angles, and the center of the estimated sphere is updated with the mean of the estimated measurements of the object present inside it. Binary probability filters for each artifact class are updated, as multiple detections are evaluated. Once the probability for any class exceeds the threshold limit, the artifact is reported and further computations for the same are suspended. This approach was used on all the robots of our team. During this thesis, I also worked on the roving platform of the team that was manually controlled for the competition. This is the same InspectorBot Super Megabot platform whose simulation model was described earlier in the presentation. This is a heavily customized robot with a large array of onboard sensors and an optical fiber cable providing high bandwidth internet to the robot. While this platform was primarily a network extender with a high gain panel antenna on the front, this could also serve as a platform to identify and locate artifacts. Due to a large payload capacity, a number of sensors were mounted and supported by the robot. A sensor head placed atop the metal chassis was designed to host the majority of the sensors. The image shows the design of the sensor head with 4 FLIR Blackfly RGB cameras, 2 FLIR Boson thermal cameras, a Velodyne Puck 16-beam LiDAR, a downward-facing RealSense stereo camera, and a VectorNav VN100 IMU module. This design was 3D printed using a nylon polymer material with infused glass beads for strength. The image shows the design model alongside the 3D printed model of the real robot. Some software additions were also done on the SMB platform. Most of the sensor drivers on the robot were treated as nodelets. The nodelets allow for memoryless copy of large messages between other nodelets on the same threads. This allows for faster transfer of large images and point cloud data between two nodelets on the same process. Multiple nodelets can be loaded by a ROS provided nodelet manager and are executed on the same process. On occasions, these become idle and are required to be restarted. The default nodelet manager cannot do this, and respawning the entire manager causes it to kill the drivers that control other sensors. To prevent this, a software package was developed to identify and respawn unresponsive nodelets without affecting the ones that are already running. In addition, the drive system of SMB was torque-based. This allowed for more intuitive handling of the robot by the human operator. However, when the operator left control of the platform to pay attention to other robots of the team, the power to the wheels was removed. If this was done on a slope, it would cause the platform to roll and it could potentially damage itself and other robots. To prevent this, automatic braking functionality was added to the onboard control. This prevented it from moving when the operator stopped controlling it. This was also used to enable emergency braking of the robot. I now conclude my contributions during this thesis. In the future, we plan to increase our reliance on simulations and develop increasingly accurate representations of the environments and robot models. Cohort will be made more modular and operate as a distributed system as opposed to a centralized framework. Having this would enable inter-robot interaction, and information can be shared among the robots performing the mission when they are in communication with each other. Using the map terrain, the decision to use a ground robot or an aerial robot to explore a certain section of the environment can be made. And this will allow for more sophisticated coordination strategies to emerge. This work would not have been possible without the support of a wonderful team helping me and guiding me along the way. I would like to thank all the members of the Autonomous Robots Lab and Team Cerberus for their constant help and guidance during this thesis. Working with such a diverse team spread throughout the world helped me learn a lot during this time. Here, I would like to list my publications in the last 2.5 years, and this slide lists my journal publications and book chapters. And this slide lists my conference publications. Thank you for your time, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.